Right, welcome everybody to this Call to Work webinar. We're going to be talking about the fascinating topic that is Christian societies in the workplace. We have a couple of really good speakers from a couple of amazing companies in the sort of financial fintech type space. They're going to be talking about Christian societies that they've been part of and they'd helped to form in that organization, which is going to be really exciting. Consider this an interactive session. Please introduce yourself in the chat if that's okay. I see some of you have already. That's cool. So introduce yourself in there so the speakers know who is around and about. Introduce yourself in there and ask any questions as we go. I'll be the moderator and I'll pick those up as we can, or raise your hand, as is the form of these types of things. But let's get started. So without further ado, I want to introduce Michael Benjamin and Jamin Shah from Intuit, and Stephen Adams from PWC. So I was fortunate enough to attend the last couple of PWC Christian Society events, and I'll let Stephen tell you more about them, but they were incredibly impactful on me. They were two of the greatest events I've been to, certainly in the calendar year, and Stephen and his team deserve a lot of credit in terms of what they're doing there, the people that they're touching and the efforts that they're going through. So it was a real inspiration for me around what's possible. And also I met Jamin at one of the smaller sort of tech meetups last year, and he told me about Michael, and I went and tracked Michael down. That took some doing, but I did find him, and then kind of here we are. So they can talk about that, where they're at with their Christian society within Intuit. So let's get started. So if we start with some intros, Stephen, maybe over to you. Just give a intro to yourself, who you are, what you do, where you're based, and a bit of your situation, and then maybe lead into a bit of a background about the Christian Society at PwC. So Stephen, over to you, if that's all right.
Thank you very much, James. Yes, I'm Stephen. I joined PwC in 2014, so coming up to the 11-year mark for me. And I joined PwC, which already had a Christian network, and I got involved straight away and wanted to join. I now chair the network, which I've done for the past few years, but have been heavily involved throughout my time there. What do I do in PwC? I sit in financial services around the data and technology part of financial services within PwC, so mainly working with banks and investment managers around regulatory reporting. Other than that, I live in Northeast London in a place called Buckhurst Hill. It's on the Central Line eastbound. For those that at least vaguely know London and the myriad of tube lines which are there. So I'm married, no kids, but I do have a cat and some chickens. Onto the bit more about the Christian network here. We've been established for around 30, 40 years. I don't know the exact date that we were established. It was way before my time. But we're very active. We've got about 800 to 900 members across our 19 offices here in the UK. And in addition to that, we're connected in with a global network of Christian, because PwC have entities and offices all around the world. So I'll leave it there, and then we can find out more later on.
Thank you on mute, James.
Yeah, saw that, sorry. Thanks for that, Stephen. I'm also a fellow chicken owner myself, so it's good to know that. I actually had a chicken die this morning, so rest in peace to that chicken. Anyway, moving on to Michael and Jamin. Maybe we'll go Michael first. Michael, just want to just give a brief introduction to yourself, and then Jamin, maybe you give an intro and then touch on the Intuit Christian Society as well, if that's all right. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet everyone on the call, virtually at least. Unfortunately, I don't have any chickens. I'll weigh up if that's a good investment in time. Maybe it's a Christians in tech type thing. I do have two young, beautiful children. Anna, who is 6, Ruben, who is 4, and I live similar, close to, I'd say, Stephen. So if you was to get the Central Line and go to Buckhurst Hill, and then go all the way to the end of the Central Line to a place called Epping, and then get in your car and drive 20 minutes, you get to a place called Ongar, which is essentially where I live. So my commute is quite hefty. I commute to my place of employment, which is Intuit. Intuit, our global tech brand. They own Credit Karma, TurboTax, MailChimp, and QuickBooks. I lead EMEA marketing, mainly focused on QuickBooks, but we also do some of the marketing for MailChimp. I've been there 2.5 years now, and Jamin and I and a few others started the ICN UK Christian group at Intuit probably about a year ago. Um, and it's been a real blessing, and it's new, it's growing, and God's been moving, and yeah, it's just been really nice. And so I'll hand over to Jamin because he's been really quarterbacking the mission there.
Cool. Hi everyone. Thanks, James, for the invite as well. Great to be here and just share a bit about um, ICN and sort of how we got started. So yeah, but before that, let me introduce myself. So I'm Jalen, 27 years old. Joined Intuit 2.5 years ago, so it's quite similar time to Michael actually. I'm a software engineer in the business. Currently working on sales and invoicing within QuickBooks. Got the branding here as well. You didn't notice. Um, and yeah, I live in Northwest London in Harrow. So the commute isn't too bad. And yeah, also obviously working at the same site here at Intuit, in our Victoria offices, in London. So yeah, so maybe a bit of background on our Christian network, ICN Intuit Christian Network. So I, along with Michael and a previous member, Cerise, started it a year and a half ago, so the end of 2023. There was an established network globally, but there wasn't a local chapter in London, so we only have one site in one office in London. And although I was plugged in with the global events and what was happening from that perspective, I was really keen to get set up locally and have a local chapter. So yeah, that started about a year and a half ago. We had a big launch, and yeah, I guess we'll follow up with some of the other bits afterwards. But I think globally we've got over 500 members of the Christian network. Um, the London site is still very small. There's less than 10 of us, members wise. But yeah, keen to hear from Stephen as well and learn from others on how we can gain traction, grow, and just yeah, honor Christ in all that we do. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get into the other bits later on, but that's just a brief overview.
That's fascinating, and it's really interesting to hear that there's a large global number there, right? A smaller UK number for now, but obviously a larger number that you can tap into. So yeah, let's get into it. And I think look, what's also interesting is yeah, the societies are at slightly different stages, right? And I'm sure the journeys of these gentlemen have been a little bit different, so it gives us some interesting alternate views on this one. So maybe Stephen, maybe over to you. So you've been at PwC for a long stint, so congrats on that. Maybe do you want to just sort of talk about, and this process may well have changed now over time, and maybe has in the sort of post-COVID era, but maybe if we were, how did you find out about the organization? And I'm guessing you've been probably part of something that's optimized that. As a new sort of PwC member, how do you find out about it? How do you find other like-minded Christians? Maybe if one of us knows someone that's joining the organization and this is some onboarding tactics we can take, like talk us through the onboarding and how people find out about it and how people get involved and then how you grow it from there.
There's a number of avenues to find out about us. Because we're an official group within the organisation, we're on the welcome and starter packs for new joiners to the firm. That's how I found out about it 11 or so years ago. I got a starter pack from PwC. I was reading it and I was like, oh, they have diversity groups, and one of those was the Christian Network. So I was like, okay, actually, one of the things I want to do, one of my first actions was to go onto the intranet and I forgot how I joined exactly what the process was, but I joined through that. So there's still that avenue. We have canteen stalls, so we have like pop-up stalls in the canteen, particularly during Christmas and Easter, where we try and interact with people and give them some information about the gospel. So there's that avenue as well, and our events, James, you were at our Easter event a little while ago. So they are, again, they're PwC events, so they can be publicised within PwC, same as our carol services. So our CEO in the UK was at our Christmas carol service, done a reading there, and you would have heard our Chief People Officer do an announcement at our Easter service. So we have senior stakeholders that come and do stuff, and then we'll publicize stuff on their LinkedIn and that kind of thing. Other than that, there is also word of mouth and people just being open Christians within their teams. So I mentioned earlier on the call, we have about 800 to 900 members, which means that we have Christians pretty much in every single team in PWC. And so part of our mission is to equip and encourage our members to be open, faithful Christians in the workplace. And if they're engaging with colleagues, then naturally, if there's another Christian in the team, then they should be saying, oh, hey, I'm a Christian as well. Are you a member of the Christian Network? So there's multiple avenues to hear about us and join.
There's so much incredible stuff there. And look, I want to come back to some of this because, again, like you mentioned in passing, like, oh, we got these very important exec people to come to our events. There's a ton of effort that's gone into that. And I want to come back to some of that in time, because again, that's not something that certainly we underestimate. But look, it's such a great message around the openness that you're sharing with each other and just how present it is. And I want to come back to some of that, but maybe ask the same question to Michael / and/or Jamie. And again, answer from an Intuit perspective, whoever makes sense for you to answer, both or either. But the same question to you guys, like as an Intuit employee or staff member, how do they find out about the you call it a network, I want to call it the right thing. How do they find out about the network? How do they get involved? And how does onboarding work for you guys?
Yeah, so I guess from Intuit's perspective, I'm not sure if it's on, we don't necessarily have like a unified welcome pack, but there is an intranet that new stars are given. And on there, we have a specific page for ERGs, employee resource groups. And on there, the Christian network is visible. So they can choose, and then there's a deep link to actually join the Christian network, and then that gets sent to myself to onboard those individuals that express interest. So that's one avenue, grabbing people from, right at the beginning when they're a new starter. In terms of, I guess, reaching people that are, I guess, already in the company, very similar to what Stephen was mentioning, I guess, with word of mouth and, as members of the network, as Christians and at Intuit, we try to have conversations and mention that there's a Christian network. Actually, we're having this event. We've got our regular meetings as well. So for example, on Tuesday mornings, every Tuesday morning we have a morning prayer meeting, and fortnightly on Fridays we have a Bible study. So that's a good opportunity to introduce the Christian network and to say, look, we've got this regular meeting. Wonder if you'd like to come along. Like I said, we're on a much smaller scale than PWC, so there's not as many of us, but I think word of mouth is definitely a good tool, and also some of the wider company events that we put on. So, for example, during Christmas, we have like a large Christmas event. Easter, we have some activities, and we may have some other events dotted out throughout the year, and that drives a lot of engagement from a company perspective as well, and a lot of eyes are drawn. So yeah, I guess there's a multiple fronts, word of mouth, kind of promoting the network through other means such as events, and also through our all hands meetings as well. So yeah, Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
The role I play with the network or group is exec sponsor, and I think one of the important things the company does, I think once a quarter in all teams, we have our ERG employee groups come forward and talk to the whole company about what they're doing, what's coming up, and some highlights. And it's a really important forum to share that this group exists. We've done some great stuff. We've got some great stuff coming up. Get involved. So that's a really important time, and Jamie's done a really good job taking those opportunities to share exciting experiences that will take place in the office. I think one of the ones that we did, and Jamie led this with Sharice and a few others, was a Christmas dinner. We brought in external caterers. It was a proper Christmas dinner, and then it was an opportunity to talk about the Christmas story. And we had screens around the office that were, talking to the Christmas story as well, the real meaning of Christmas, but also connecting it with what people love, which is food. and who doesn't love a Christmas dinner? So it's things like that where we drive engagement and awareness across the company. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And just, I want to ask one question based on the meetups that you have, your Bible studies and your meetups. Are they taking place on Intuit premises? You do those in the offices and that's all okay?
Yeah, exactly. So we book out. We've got a long-term book out of a room every morning, every Tuesday. It's quite a visible room as well, right next to reception, right next to the boardroom. And we would make the requirements were open, open door policy pretty much. So people walking past can see that we're praying. People waiting outside the room. So yeah, no issues there. So physical at the Intuit offices, but also online as well. So people who aren't able to make it to the office can join online via Zoom.
Great, really interesting. And maybe kick it over to you, Stephen. You talk about larger, and we'll come back to the Intuit guys after this. You're part of a larger global network. How do you guys connect into the more of the global network? More the Christians? Is it separate? Is it part of the same group? Is it harder to communicate? You can communicate holistically. Like, how does it work with the other Christians in some of the other markets around your company?
Yeah, good question. PWC is a partnership, which means because of the legal entity structure, essentially we're different groups. We sit within different legal entities. So no group sits on top of another group, and there's not a kind of global group, if you like. There's more of a global network. The UK started as pretty much the first group and has been planting other groups in other territories. So we helped the US kickstart a few years ago, and some others, South Africa, Netherlands, etc., etc. We don't really do too much together. We might have one large global meeting that all the members come together and we have kind of global celebration and just to connect in people. And then at the leadership level, we connect in to help each other out. The UK and the US are the two largest groups and are substantial and have not only a large membership, but also a broad leadership team that can then help and serve either plant other networks in the world, in other territories, or just help fledgling ones to say, okay, what extra support do you need? Do you need materials? Do you need a hand running some meetings? Do you need just pastoral support? So it happens more on that level. So from a global perspective, we're focused on establishing groups that will continue, that are, they won't just wither once we withdraw support. So they'll keep on going.
Got it. And same question to Michael. Jamin, interaction with your international colleagues on this. Have you been able to get inspiration? Because obviously they've got some good numbers out there.
Yeah. Very plugged in with our global leaders. So I have a regular check-in every month with our global leaders, just to cascade any information top down and also what's been going on locally with our London site. Similar to what Stephen was mentioning, I mean, any materials or piece of information that they can share that would help us locally. That could be things that they've learned from running the site globally or individual sites, especially within the US, since we're a large US presence. So any information that can be shared across different local chapters, that will be then shared with us from those meetings. And also, obviously, we're invited to all the global meetings that take place as well. So they have like a week of prayer in the US, which we can attend. Also, Easter celebrations, Christmas celebrations. So the idea is that everyone can get involved from the different networks and be plugged into the global presence as well. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that's really interesting. And have you found that how has your participation and the existence of these societies and networks helped with your openness around your faith at work? and now it may be difficult to contrast it because it sounds like Stephen, pretty much from week one when you joined, you knew there was some people that were part of it, and that was great. But would you say that it's allowed you to be potentially be more open or difficult to context? Like maybe put us in the room, and maybe Stephen wants to answer that. Do you kind of feel it adds to that environment? Try to give us a bit of context.
I think it helps in two ways. Firstly, just by knowing other Christians in the team or the organization that are open, encourage the environment encourages you to be open. Yeah, you can be open because you know there are others. And once you start talking about it, you kind of normalize talking about it. In my first week of PWC, there were 5 of us that joined together, and we're in a room of about maybe 10 people. We're doing kind of day-to-day stuff. We had our laptops out and we were learning and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna come out as a Christian as soon as I can. So I just mentioned, I went to church on the weekend, etc., etc., etc. And it turns out that out of the five of us that were new, 3 of us were Christians. So I kind of stepped out and I was like, oh, hold a minute. Immediately I found other Christians, and that happened because I stepped out. So that was a real encouragement to me. And then we just started talking about faith and church and stuff like that, and everyone else was in the room. And from that point onwards, it just became normal in the team. It didn't talking about church and faith didn't become weird. Like, it wasn't weird anymore. It became normalized. So my first point is just knowing other Christians kind of encourages you to normalize.
And just to be clear, were you aware of the society and its existence and its encouragement before you did that, or was this before you knew of it?
Well, I was aware of it, but I hadn't joined any meetings or anything. It was kind of like my first week.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
The
second point is having a group or an official organization gives you confidence because you have some form of protection. And an example is, and this has happened incredibly rarely, but sometimes other colleagues in the organization act out of line in terms of faith, particularly the Christian faith. They think they go further. So there was an example in one of our offices where a group of Christians were meeting, and they got told by someone senior that they couldn't meet. And then straight away they emailed me, and it's all sorted within 30 minutes. Because I could loop in the DNI and be like, no, that's not what we do at PwC. That's not acceptable. So it actually gives Christians some protection, and they know where they stand. They know that they can share their faith and invite colleagues to events. Like the Easter event is an official PwC event, and they can have that confidence because they have an organization behind them backing them. So I would say those are the two main points.
That's great, and well done for getting involved. But it's such a difference, isn't it, when you know you have the company in air quotes behind you, right? It's a different situation, isn't it? But well done. I think it's important. Okay, and Jamin, Michael, same question for you.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, talking from a much smaller group, I think that still rings true in terms of knowing that you have some like-minded people, other Christians in the office that you can confide in, you can talk with, and you know that you've got some camaraderie in that aspect. That's really useful. And also, to the same point, I think Intuit's really good at supporting all the networks and making sure that they have full support from the top down. So that's from senior leadership, and Michael can probably speak a bit more about that as well. But there's a big emphasis on making sure that everyone feels they can bring their complete or full selves to work. That means, being able to be a Christian in the space and share your faith, talk to others about your faith. I do have actually a similar story to Stephen. It was at my previous company. So this was sort of a prelude to the Intuit Christian Network, and is actually what I felt the call of Christ to start the network at Intuit because of this. Very similar. So I was onboarding a new grad. and I was away the previous week on a week-long Christian conference. And my old self would have just said, "Oh, I was on leave, I was on holiday, not doing the specifics." But I kind of pushed myself to actually say, I was actually at a Christian conference. This is what I was doing. And it turns out he was a Christian as well, and he was a new Christian. So we spent the whole onboarding meeting, which was like an hour, just talking about faith, and yeah, became good friends and still friends to this day. So that was like sort of a prelude of what prompted me to really be bold in my faith and to stand on the word of God. And um, I think I felt the call to start the Christian network based off of that. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence to be able to say, actually, you don't know where God has placed you, or God has placed you in a specific place, and we don't sometimes necessarily know why, but we just have to stand and share our faith boldly. And that could lead to these sorts of scenarios where, if I hadn't done that, then I would have never known that he was a Christian, and I wouldn't have that connection and relationship. And he's really grown in his faith. So just carrying that through and being bold and um, being able to having the support of a company as well, and knowing that there are others there that can support you as well. I think because Intuit, especially in the London side, we don't have many of us. Um, probably wouldn't it probably isn't the same extent to what it is at PwC in terms of the amount of people that we have. But I think I still have that confidence too. For example, in meetings, um, what did I do on the weekend? I was at church on Sunday. I did this X, Y, and Z, and that's always a nice kind of icebreaker and sort of opening because you'd be surprised people then will ask follow-up questions like, oh, people don't necessarily have a good understanding of what church is. You'd be surprised. So they'll always be quite curious, is what I found, and ask follow-up questions and are very interested. Um, so I think yeah, that would be my answer. Michael, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I wouldn't say starting up with Jamie in the ICN UK group has made me more confident in sharing my faith or expressing my faith at work. For me, that's come with experience. Over time, each job I've gone to, I feel like I've become more confident in who I am, who I am as a Christian, who I am in my faith. And over time, I've just got more confident, more bold about sharing my faith, sharing I go to church, sharing I believe in God and Christ. Um, and I think for me, what I want to do through the group and what we've been trying to do through the group is encourage others to be more bold in their faith. So by letting them know that there is already Christians at all different levels of seniority across the business, and we are connecting, and we are uh, trying to build a sense of community and belonging, so they can express their faith in work with colleagues. Then hopefully they will feel more confident outside of the prayer group or the Bible studies or whatever event we put on to maybe then be more bold going back out into their team, sitting at their desk talking to others. So I see it more as trying to encourage others through our connection and through our community to go back out into those meetings and the work that they do day to day to be more bold. Um, I first had the experience of a Christian group at work when I was at Meta, and I loved it. I got so much from it. Like you'd have the toughest weeks, and the highlight of your week is actually a time just to pause whilst at work to just get together and share what challenges you've had, share what testimonies you have, pray together, discuss God's word together, and you come out 30 minutes later and you just feel revived and refreshed. And when I joined into it after Meta, I thought to myself, I want others to get that sense of what it feels like to connect with other Christians, people like-minded in the faith, be refreshed at work, be encouraged at work, be able to pause at work and center on God, and then go back out into the workplace and feel a bit stronger, feel a bit sharper, feel a bit more refreshed. And that's what I wanted to do with ICN UK, and James there from the front. And it's small but growing, and we've had some testimonies and yeah, some good stories.
And Michael, thanks for mentioning Meta because that was on my list of questions. Can you maybe talk about the Christian Society set up at Meta? And it sounds like you took some really good ideas and some good inspiration from what you learnt there. Maybe touch on your experience at that particular company and maybe one or two of the couple of things you maybe were inspired by to bring into this society that you learnt from those guys.
Yeah, of course. I mean, number one, Meta is great in the sense of there are numerous groups that are encouraged and endorsed so many in the sense of, I think it was my second month, I got a message that said, we also have a group for Michaels at Meta, and we're going to hold a committee and decide if you're going to be accepted onto this group. And then, long and behold, 2 weeks later, I was accepted to Michaels at Meta. So there was, I started to say there's so many groups, right? And one of which was the Christian Network at Meta. And the first time I went along, it was probably about 4 months into my time there. And it was really nice. Like, it was a lunch, psalms, and prayer. That was the sort of formula that we had there. And I went to the first one without my lunch because I didn't know we had to bring lunch. And I was like, "Oh, where's your lunch? You should bring some lunch." And it was just really natural in a sense of eating, talking, communicating, reading the psalm, and then prayer at the end. Often we, we wouldn't always get time to pray at the end because, by the time we're just talking and sharing and reading the psalm and expressing what the psalm means to us and what God's speaking through the time, we're like, oh my days, there's like 5 minutes left. We better pray. And number one, I felt like I built friendships with the people in that group through just being able to, sometimes it's not always easy to share with other people your interpretation of the word or what you think God's speaking to you for scripture, but through just all of us being vulnerable in that regard and sharing what we think God's saying to us through the Psalms, through the Bible, I felt like we built closer connections. Um, Sometimes we started to go through stuff at work, which then meant because we had that connection, we can share with each other as Christians what's happened at work, um, without, feeling hesitant. And then therefore we can then pray about it together, which was really, really nice. And yeah, there was a lot happening. There's COVID at the time I was there. There was a Black Lives Matters, all the rallies while I was there. There's so much stuff that happened in those 2 years, and literally, um, almost every week, you knew that you had a time in the week where you can be vulnerable, but on the same foundation of faith, pray together, take encouragement together, read God's word, and then it was usually a Friday, so then it set you up for the Friday afternoon and the weekend and for another week ahead. But yeah, that was a formula. It was like lunch and then you know just sharing and just talking over lunch and then Psalms and then a prayer at the end. We also sometimes did events. We might go off and there might be some Christmas carols around Christmas time, or we might put on maybe a bit of a lunch for the wider group. But it really, really nice. It was all on Zoom because obviously it was COVID times, but honestly, I really valued that group. And we're still in touch now. So because a lot of people moved on, as you know, obviously there's been a lot of people changes at Meta, and people have gone on to other companies, and they've almost got a group for everyone that's moved on, and for the Christians that are still there to connect. I think like once a month we all get together, which is really nice that we're staying in contact with colleagues that have left and moved on as well. So it was quite a special group.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And look, I think an important aspect of this is there's the people that are in these businesses experiencing it, and obviously Meta, PWC, Intuit, these are huge companies, especially Meta, obviously, that we dominate our lives and our thinking, and we have opinions on them, right? Because they kind of want us to have opinions, right? So an opinion, and I can remember I was at one of the Faith Tech events, Andy might have been at this one, where they talked about how one of the major high ups at Meta, I can't remember his name, sorry, um, he was a Christian, and he was going against I guess what may be considered a public perception of these companies of they may be anti-Christian, like whatever it may be, because they would be vocally, actively, financially supporting what some Christians or many Christians would consider non-Christian causes, right? So then you could say a perception is formed, right? Maybe Stephen, go to you. Like, is that an experience you've ever had on the inside, or have you seen equality, or like how has that worked out in your experience of PwC?
Well, PwC is less political than organizations such as Meta and other social media
Little bit, but
platforms.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, just a little bit. So yeah, PwC kind of stays out of is less controversial from that front. They don't have a role in what people can post and taking posts down, and those are probably the the big ticket things. We're very fortunate at PwC. Because we've been going for a while as a faith network, and because we have long established relationships with senior people and they're seeing the great stuff we're doing, we haven't really had any issues with what we can do. In fact, I'm often surprised with how much we get away with. The only thing sometimes you've got to push back on is occasionally a D&I person will come in and say, okay, well, kind of all faiths are kind of the same thing. Can't we just kind of roll you in and kind of treat you the same? So we have to sometimes push back on that.
Just combine you into what? Just combine you into one overall religion.
Yeah, it's all
group.
faith, you know. You're all trying to do the same, all trying to do, yeah. So occasionally we have that, and we have to like push back and say, hold on, no. And then occasionally this has all happened less recently, but they sometimes are, want us to promote other networks, and that's not necessarily something we might want to do. We have to navigate events that happened in the Middle East caused the firm to make some amendments to the employee manual, not because of our faith network, but because of other groups that are in PwC. And so some of those might inadvertently affect Christians in the future at PwC, but so we had to feed into that. So there are movements that happen within PwC that we as a Christian group need to stand up and feed back on to say, oh, have you thought about this correctly? Or no, I don't think you've taken this the right way. But we really haven't been in a situation where we've thought, oh, hold on a minute, we're not being treated properly or fairly.
Got it. Okay. And Michael, Jamie?
Yeah, I'd say from our perspective, a couple of anecdotes I can give. On the whole, I'd say we haven't received much pushback at all on events and events that we hold and communications that we've sort of sent out. One example that I would give is I think it was not the Christmas that just went, the previous Christmas. We were last Easter. My apologies. Yeah, last Easter we for these big events we put together slides so that we can have them on TVs that are shown around the office just to promote events and stuff. And we make a point of being overtly Christian. So having like He is risen, the cross, the empty tomb, and all this sort of stuff. And that does have to get approved. And we had Bible verses as well on other slides. And there was a bit of pushback from one of the site engagement members, people, just wanted to see if we could potentially reword or basically not have the image of the cross, and like the He has risen. And I did kind of push back on that and say I don't really see an issue with this. What is the issue? And they kind of sort of stepped back a little bit and said, yeah, actually. So I think, yeah, just that. And then we were able to actually show that image. There were no issues there afterwards, but just a small little pushback. And it wasn't done in an offensive way. It was more so kind of like, I don't know if this is okay, like, I think it'd be better if not. And I could have said, okay, no, that's fine. But I think as a Christian, we're meant to stand and as long as it's not offending him, which obviously the cross is not offensive, right? I mean, it's a sign of God's love and Jesus' love for us all. It's the opposite. So I felt the call to push back and be like, no, actually, I don't see an issue with this. If there is an issue, we can discuss it further and maybe take it up with leaders and stuff. And in that case, that proved to be the right decision. We're able to keep that. So I think on the whole, there aren't many issues that we've encountered with that. But I think in those scenarios where you do encounter some pushback, I think it's worth standing your ground. I think that's what I've found. Another example I can give maybe in terms of like the political landscape as well. As you can imagine, like the large tech companies, there's a trend of maybe engaging more politically. As Stephen was saying, maybe PwC not as much, but I think with the large tech companies, they're very heavy on that. Particularly with the like Pride Month and all this sort of stuff. And the Pride Network is actually the largest network within Intuit. And I think it's very similar in other tech companies as well. So there's quite a lot of heavy backing from that aspect, and they do get a lot of charities that come in to speak. And there was an instance, I think this was a couple of years ago now, where they invited a charity that was questionable, more so from the perspective of it was a charity that was being investigated by the Charity Commission for malpractice, effectively. And there was an active investigation going on. So I saw that, and I raised it with the ethics team at the time. And just purely from the perspective of actually this charity, I don't think it's appropriate for this charity to be speaking at a company like ours while they're being investigated by the Charity Commission for potential malpractice. So the talk did go ahead at the time, but they did suspend future talks and suspend any further invitation for them speaking out into it until that investigation was complete. So I think that just shows that, you know, if you feel that there's something that is going on that isn't right, and even from the perspective of, you could go in from the perspective of, actually, as a Christian, I don't believe this is correct, but I don't think you'd get the same response as if you were to go from the perspective where actually these are the facts. This is why I think it's inappropriate for a charity like this to be speaking out into it. I feel like there was a much better response, and that also aligns with our Christian view and standpoint. Whilst not, you know, seeking to offend, but also standing on the word of God, and standing on the word of God, which is the truth. So there's just a couple of examples there.
Awesome, I love that. A couple more questions. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to put this one to Stephen, maybe exclusively, because the scale of which you're achieving stuff at PwC, the people that are at your event, there's probably 100 plus at your event. You told me that the main PwC page was talking about it. You're out, it's part of that. You've got major stakeholders in the business participating in that. That's incredible. That may seem quite a few steps away from someone that's trying to get a society going. Like, what have been the key milestones that have enabled you to do that, Stephen? You know, because these things aren't simple, right? Especially when you're talking about big execs in the business and corporate pages and stuff like that. You know, this isn't something you just do in a quick Slack message. Like, explain some of the diligence that you've showed in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it's important to stress, again, I know we've said it earlier, that the PWC Christian Network's been around for about 40 years. And none of this happened overnight. We've our last Easter event where the Chief People Officer spoke, that was our 7th Easter service, and it was the first time we'd had an exec board member along to it. So it's, you know, it took 7 years. Yeah, none of this has happened overnight. It started with a couple of people in London just meeting to pray once a week, you know, getting 2-3 people. One of the people, I managed to speak to them before they left the firm, they retired. You know, some weeks there would just be 2 of them. Some weeks he, you know, would turn up and end up being in the room by himself, and he would just pray there by himself. So when you start up, it's going to be small, but those smaller groups, those smaller interactions, meeting to pray, glorify God just as much as 100 people coming to meet together. And it's really important not to have a very rigid definition of success. Say, okay, well, if this is going to be a successful Christian group, then you know, we need to be this number or that number, or, you know, we need to have this many meetings, or we need to be officially recognized. That's actually a mistake we made internally at PwC when we were trying to plant in Argentina. they went and they tried to get official recognition. They got pushed back and were like, no, we don't do diversity events in Argentina, diversity groups in Argentina. And, you know, that was a big pushback for them and they kind of felt like a failure. But actually, depending on your context, because being a PWC, I also go to clients and other companies, a lot of the time American institutions, which are much tougher environments in general for faith networks, because of the separation of church and state kind of culture filters through, I think. You know, in some contexts, it's not possible to get an officially recognized group. And I think it takes just perseverance. And as long as you're meeting with colleagues regularly and coming together, that's a great group. Start from there, and just be faithful. And we learn and we read many times in scripture that God works to his timing, not to ours. And so you might be at, you know, 4 to 5 members or 10 members or whatever it is for many, many years, and then suddenly something happens. So I even push back in the PWC group when people are like, oh, you know, great, well, can we get to 1,000 members? Can we get to more members? And I always push back on that because it's not about numbers. You just got to be faithful, and then God will do whatever he wants with that. You know, it started with 12. Jesus only had 12, you know, and then it grew from there. But what I would say, and my advice would be for any group, whatever the size, and if you're a leader and if you're starting something up, is try and delegate. There are a lot of groups where someone enthusiastic comes along, they start up a group and they do everything themselves, because they want it run in a certain way and they have a certain vision, and then they might leave the firm and it all dissipates. So try and delegate, try and build a team around you. And I think that has been probably, you talked about the milestones, but really the most important factor in our growth, I think, apart from the Lord's work, and it's been the Lord's hand, is the fact that we've got a very wide leadership group. We have about 40, 50 people actually serving as leaders in the group, which means that if I go, or if 10 of the other leaders go, actually there's still like loads of leaders there that can pick it up and continue to run and know what's going on. So because we've had that continuity, we've had that continual growth.
Amazing. And you actually answered the
question.
You did actually. You actually answered the second question I haven't asked you yet. So thank you for doing that. And look, I think some of those pointers were so helpful, and I'm writing a bunch of this down because you are right. It isn't about the numbers. It's about, as Jamin said previously, it's about that small apostolically minded group who are prepared to say those things, do those things, right, which inspires others. And that's really important. And I think for somebody who's looking to maybe start a group, there's people on this call, people who listen back to this video who are like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a group, or I want to find one, or I want to do something in my company, right? There's some real kind of like some real key learnings there. So appreciate that. Jamin, Michael, is there any advice you would give, maybe a point each, to someone who maybe in a company, they may not know other Christians, they want to kind of potentially get something started? Any advice you'd give them from what you've learned so far on your particular journey?
Yeah, I'd say number one, just start the conversation. I completely echo what Stephen said. I mean, we're kind of in that phase right now, right? With our London site, it doesn't matter, where two or more are gathered, it doesn't matter the number that you have. I think just to start the conversation, it might just be, you're first on the call and there's someone else there, and you're like, oh, how's your weekend? Yeah, I was at church this Sunday. And then just getting the conversation going. It's like when you're at the getting a coffee or something in the kitchen, have the conversation there. How's your week? And then you never know what could come from that conversation. That could be, as long as we're faithful as Christian, that could be the start, that could plant the seed. And however the Lord moves, however the Lord works, as long as we're faithful and we do our part, the Lord will do the rest. So I think, yeah, just get the conversation started, even if it's as little as describing your weekend, saying I went to church and did X, Y, and Z. You'd be surprised at how people respond to that, and that could be a snowball effect. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'd say use your network. We use our network so much in business, in a professional environment, for our careers. And what I found is that through speaking to yourself, James, or Jamin, or be it some of the my friends that were in the Meta Christian group, they say, "Oh, I know a Christian who works at Amazon. I know a Christian who works at PWC. I know a Christian who works at Microsoft." And then just through by saying, "Look, I want to start this Christian group. I think I start one at Intuit," and just sharing that with Christians that you know already that maybe work in a similar industry, similar field, I found that you'll get names. They'll say, "Oh, I know someone that works there who's a Christian," or and I think that's a good way to think. Oh, you can maybe go up to the individual and say, "Oh, I know that you know Grace. She said that you guys went to I don't know, a church conference together. I'm also a Christian. One of the things I was thinking of doing is starting up a Christian group," and you can have that conversation. So use your network in and outside of work to try and share your intentions, uh, connect with other Christians, and start to lay the foundation. I also think take the time to do some research. When I joined Intuit, I didn't know there was a Christian group out the door. So I looked online and looked in the forums and looked and asked HR, and I asked questions, right? And then sometimes you don't have to always recreate something from scratch. Someone might say, "Oh, we did have one a year ago," or "We do have one in the US," or sometimes we meet up with a group of Christians from another business once a year, and you can then use some of the seeds from your research that you find to then put fuel in the fire and form something. So yeah, just to recap, I'd say use your network and do a bit of research. You'll be surprised what you'll find or what God will help you find.
Absolutely. Amazing. I'm conscious of time, and I'm conscious some people probably have 2 o'clock meetings. I'm sure Michael does. So it's probably the best place to end it. But look, you guys have been so inspirational with your time. I'll post ways for people to contact you primarily on LinkedIn and the like. But look, I think we've learned a ton today, tons that we can take into our business, tons that we can turn into our own network. And I just want to thank you all individually from me, because all 3 of you really inspire me. The things that you're doing, and not only the events that you're putting on that we're seeing, but the way that you're walking, the way that you're conducting yourself. I think I just want to encourage all 3 of you. I want to encourage everybody on this call to kind of keep doing what they're doing and build on some of these seeds that we're seeing sown today, because I think it's really, really important and inspirational for all of us. And the next time we check in with these guys, even though it isn't about numbers, Stephen says, I know there's going to be way more Christians in those groups anyway, even though it isn't about numbers, but numbers are cool as well, and stuff. So look, have a great rest of your afternoon. The sun is shining. I hope the sun is shining where you are, in this wonderful place that we call Earth that God created. And thanks for being part of this. And I will post the recording, and I will speak to you all soon. Thank you so much.